All right, so now that we've gotten a brief introduction to some of the complexities of working with ServiceNow's types from inside JavaScript, the next thing that I want to do is introduce you to another big pitfall that people get into when working with GlideRecords and GlideElements. Okay, so the problem here is often referred to, at least where I've seen it, as the weak reference or the pass-by reference problem. And while that name might seem a little bit opaque, right, a little bit vague to some people, basically what it means is that when we assign a glide element to something, okay, here, let me actually just draw this out for you. I'm going to jump back to my whiteboard here and draw this out. When we assign a glide element to a variable, right, remember that what's going on behind the scenes is when we set up a glide record, it's going to be pulling records from the table we associate it with that fit whatever criteria we've specified, right? If we've set any filters on it, which we often don't. Right, so I'm going to draw things a little bit differently here. Let's say that we create a glide record, which I'll write as GR here. And as we've already seen, it starts off by basically being empty, not pointing at any record in particular. And then when we call gr.next, it basically shifts that down to the next available result, right? So when we call gr.next, it's going to remove this arrow here. And actually, I can undo this so that I can actually draw it like this. There we go. It's now going to point at the first result. Then when we call gr.next, it's going to move on to the next result, right? That one's going to be gone, and it's going to point at that one. Then the next result, right? It's going to point at that one, and it's no longer going to be pointing at that one. You get the idea. Now, the complexity that this causes is the fact that when we access glide elements on this glide record, right? So let's say that we, say var first price, right? Let's say that we're trying to maintain the price of the first item or the first result. If we say var first price equals gr.price, when it's currently pointing at this first item, well, here's the funny thing, is our variable isn't going to be holding a value, it's going to be holding what's known as a reference to the current record's value. So in other words, if we call, right now, while this glide record is pointing at the first result, if we call first price dot get value, it'll return whatever the value is of the price on that first record. And just for the sake of demonstration here, let's say that this is $100, $200, $300, okay? Well, here's the problem. When we call gr.next, and it's no longer pointing at the first record, but at the second one, well, here's what happens. If we now call firstPrice.getValue again when it's pointing at R2, it's going to return the price of the second record instead, right? It's going to give us $200 as the result. All right, so in other words, these glide elements are kind of slippery, if you want to put it that way, when we assign them to variables, because instead of having just a fixed value, we have this shifting reference to whatever the glide record that they're associated with happens to be pointing at. Okay, so let's just demonstrate this back in a script, because I feel like some people don't believe me when I tell them that that's how that works. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to, I'm just going to click Update, and we'll create a new fix script. So let's navigate back to fix scripts here again. All right, and I'm going to create a new one here, which I'll call something like weak reference demo. And then for the script, I'm basically just going to write that situation that I talked about previously in here. So we're going to say var gr equals new glide record. All right. And actually, let's just use the incident table here just because we're maybe a little bit more comfortable with the structure of that than with catalog items, things like that. So what we're going to do next is we're going to say gr.query, right? We're not going to add any filters to it. And we're going to say gr.next to get the first element in there, right? The first result, that is. So again, let's say that what we do is we get the description, and by that I mean the GlideElement version, the raw version of the short description for the first result. Here's what that's going to look like. We're going to say var first description equals gr.short description. And oops, let me just write first short description just to be extra specific. And now here's what we're going to do. We're going to print out the value of it. So we're going to say gs.info, and we'll say something like first description or first short description is, and then what we'll do is we will put a colon there, and then we're going to just say first short description, and we can say dot get value, although it doesn't really matter if we call that or not. It's going to show up as the same thing. Cool. So now what we're going to do is let's loop through a few more glide records and see how first short description holds onto its value. Just a little hint here, it won't. So here's what that's going to look like. We're just going to use a for loop here to loop through only the first few of these. And actually, a better way you can do this, I don't know if I've shown you this or not, I don't think I have, but we can actually add what's known as a limit to the query. So if we say gr.setLimit and say 10, then that's going to limit it to 10 incidents, which is a little bit more manageable when we're just doing a simple demonstration like this. All right, so let's just loop through this glide record now. We're going to say while gr, oops, let's put that in parentheses there, while gr.next, and inside here we're going to say gs.info, and actually, let me just steal this same thing from here and put it right into there. All right, cool. So are you ready to be surprised? Let's do it. We're going to save that. We're going to run our fix script. We're going to say proceed. And sure enough, we see that as the record, or as the result that the glide record is pointing at changes, so does the value of our variable. And that is not at all what we want. So all of this points to a very important rule of thumb that you should follow when working with glide records and glide elements, and that is that they should be converted into JavaScript values as soon as possible, right? So what we did here is we created a potential bug in our program by waiting to convert this short description into a JavaScript value, right? At this point in the program, it's a glide element. At this point in the program, it's a glide element. And what that means is that in this loop, it's still a glide element with a moving, or as I like to think of it, slippery value, right? So anyway, here's what it would have looked like if we had done this correctly. We would just say gr.shortDescription.getValue, and then we wouldn't have to call it on here or on here, and it would maintain its value for the entire script. So let's save this. We're going to run our fixed script again. We're going to say proceed, and sure enough, we see that even though the glide record, or the result that the glide record is pointing at changes, the short description remains the same, okay? So anyway, hopefully this helps you avoid some very difficult to track down bugs in the future.